Let's go to the document that you referenced several times, the Secret History.
The Secret History is a very unusual document, and I happen to love it very much. But I said, Genghis Khan allowed nothing to be written about him in his lifetime. People couldn't take notes. Even the army Genghis Khan ordered the invention of the alphabet for the Mongol people, and it was adapted from the Uyghur people. And so to this day, it's often called the Uyghur alphabet, the Uyghur alphabet. So he had ordered that, and he'd ordered his children to learn to read and write, and some did. I think most did not, but some did. But one of the things he did with every campaign, even the one at the Merkid when he rescued Berta, was he always adopted one orphan. And that child became a full member of the Mongol nation in his household. His mother, Erlun, would raise the child. So she eventually had a whole household full of boys of different tribes, but they all became very high-ranking members of the government. And one was a Tatar boy who turned out not to be so great as a soldier, but he could read and write. He was the best. And later, eventually, he became the supreme judge, appointed by Genghis Khan, of course. And so when Genghis Khan died, he recognized it was important not just to write down the law. That's all Genghis Khan allowed to be written in blue books, only the law. Nothing about him or campaigns or military anything. But Shigehutuk was his name. Shigehutuk realized that this was going to be lost, that this is a great historic thing that has happened. So he compiled a work. Part of it, I don't know, other people contributed, helped him, but it's a little bit unclear. The Mongols, they don't specify that. They always tell you exactly where something happens. So we know exactly where it happened in Mongolia. You can still go to that spot where he wrote it. That's very important to the Mongols. And we also know it's the year of the Mao, so it was 1228. Genghis Khan had died in 27. So he wrote down, it begins with what we would say are the myths. Although I'm not sure they're myths, but the origins of the myths. It begins with the marriage of a gray-blue wolf with a tawny deer. Then some people say, well, that's some kind of myth. It's totemic. And Mongols mostly, they look at me. I asked them about this. They said, what? He was named blue-gray wolf. She was named tawny deer. They married. They're very practical about it, and they think they're real people. Maybe they were or not. I don't know. But so this earlier history is just the genealogy as it should be. Who knows? But it's also in there because, like Bodinchar, they call him Bodinchar the Fool, the ancestor of Temujin. He's cast out because he's just so dumb. The rest of the family doesn't want him. And his father is undetermined who he was. He kidnaps the Urihanghai woman. She has the child who becomes the ancestor. So it's a confusing mess, but I tend to think it's probably accurate. It has a lot of good information. And by the time you get to the life of Temujin, the reason we know these intimate things is because that person, Shigehutuk, he was there, sleeping in the same ger with the people. So we even see in there, he will record instances where Bursta sits up in bed and tells her husband, okay, you got to do this, you got to do that. You can't do this anymore. We can't think of, it's all recorded, right? So it's a very intimate document. Mm-hmm. And this is one reason that it was secret. It was only for the family. They were trying to uphold Genghis Khan's prohibition against putting out information about the family. So it was secret for a very long time. So much so that scholars began to think it didn't exist. And then in the 19th century, a Russian academic who was working in China at the time, in Beijing, he discovered a manuscript, which was very, very odd, that people didn't think was anything because it's all Chinese characters, but it makes no sense in Chinese. But he recognized, but if you read it, pronounce it, it makes sense in Mongolian. And so it was in this code that had been used to record the information in Chinese.
So they're recording the sounds.
The sounds, correct. Yeah. They use Chinese characters to record sounds, which is always problematic in some little areas. You're not exactly sure what the name is or something like. But it was a very unusual document. And then once they found it, they realized that some of the Persian documents had incorporated part of that already. So that was very helpful to me because some of the Persians I trust very much, and I like their work very much. And so it was helpful that it already existed, and all of it, some of it existed in other Mongolian sources that were written later. Some of it was just incorporated. So it seemed to be fairly genuine, but it wasn't 100% pure. It had little things had happened to it along the way. Some things have been snipped here and there, and a few words changed. And like sometimes for Temujin, they call him Genghis Khan. Well, he wasn't the Han then. And sometimes they call him Han, which is like chief, and other times Han, which is emperor. Well, in Mongolia, it's a big difference, So there are little things like this that move around that you're not sure why, but it's a document that I have great faith in. It was not published in English until 1982, but Francis Woodman Cleaves at Harvard University translated it in the 50s. It was ready for publication, and he was having trouble with the publisher. And so it didn't appear for nearly 30 years. It was supposed to be 2 volumes. The first volume is the translation. The second volume was going to be the notes, and the second volume was lost. To this day, it hasn't been found. I would love to see that. But anyway, now it's in all languages just about in the world.
Can you clarify? So there's 2 volumes. The 19th century Chinese manuscript covers the first volume.
Yes, that was translated and then published by Harvard University. But the notes were just the notes from the scholar Francis Woodman Cleaves. Those were his notes, not Mongolian notes. There are Chinese notes that went with it because the Chinese had trouble understanding a lot of things in it. And they disapproved of some things, so they would try to put their own notes in the margins to kind of correct the story and explain away why the Mongols women would be often marrying their stepson. It just did not match with Confucian ethics. So there's several things like that they try to skip around. But so it's interesting just to read the Ming Dynasty notes that are attached to it. But the document itself, Mongoli Nutstopcho, it's just so important. And for me, it was the guiding document. I didn't want to be guided by anything else first. Everything else I would check to correlate and fill in blanks and give more information. But I went to Mongolia to travel around to those places because they are so exact in there and to feel it. And it's so important, I think, because history does not live in books. History does not live in archives or even libraries, as much as I need them for my work. But history lives in the people. History lives in the memory of the people and the culture. And for example, the episode with the kidnapping of Berchtesgaden. So I went to that place, and I didn't know when it happened, what season it happened. It was very important for figuring out the births that came afterwards and other events that were being correlated. Very important to me. And so I'm just talking to the people who live in that valley, the nomads there. They said, "Oh, it's clear. It was the winter." I said, "Oh, where did you read that?" I said, "No. Granny Quaxin was on the ground and she could feel the vibrations." She said, "Look, this is summertime now. You're not going to feel any vibrations. The ground here is so soft." Suddenly, a whole important piece that I've been searching for just came together from some nomad sitting there next to his horse. And he was absolutely right. It could only happen in the winter. And that also correlates with the time that raiding was done. So it correlates with other historic factors. But then that gave me the time basis for figuring out a lot of other things. History lives in the people.